Picture this, a scorching summer day in an upscale Texas neighborhood. Aaliyah Monroe, a 36-year-old black businesswoman, is finally enjoying the peace she worked her whole life to earn, lounging by her own pool when flashing lights and police sirens suddenly interrupt. Two officers rush in. Someone reported her as a trespasser in her own backyard. After over a decade of building her own skincare brand from the ground up, working 16-hour days and surviving both personal and financial storms, she finally claimed her slice of peace. The highlight, a flawless in-ground pool shimmering under the Texas sun, surrounded by a sleek wooden deck and tall hedges for privacy. But just as Aaliyah settles into her lounge chair, drink in hand, the sound of sirens slices through the calm. Two patrol cars pull up to her driveway, tires screeching, and within seconds, two officers approach with hands near their holsters. "Ma'am, we received a report of a trespasser in the backyard pool," one of them says. Aaliyah blinks, stunned. "You mean me?" From behind the curtains across the street, she sees the familiar silhouette of her neighbor, Victoria Langford, pale platinum blonde and always watching. Her curtain twitches slightly. She's smiling. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup. Let's rewind to 6 weeks earlier, the day Aaliyah moved in. The house was everything she had worked for, modern, spacious, and nestled in a quiet, predominantly white, gated community called Willow Creek Heights. She pulled into the driveway with a moving van full of hope and pride. The realtor had told her the neighbors were friendly, respectful, and quiet. But friendly wasn't exactly the word Aaliyah would have used when she first met Victoria. She was arranging furniture on her front porch when Victoria appeared out of nowhere, arms crossed, eyes scanning her from head to toe like a barcode. "Are you the new tenant?" she asked with a tight smile. "No," Aaliyah said calmly. "I'm the new owner." Victoria's expression barely shifted, but her lips thinned. "Oh, I didn't realize the home had been sold." Then she turned on her heel and walked away without another word. It didn't take long for the microaggressions to start. At first it was little things. Victoria leaving passive-aggressive notes in Aaliyah's mailbox about trash bins not being perfectly aligned or her car being slightly over the line. Once, she rang the doorbell just to inform Aaliyah that her guests had parked too close to the curb. Then came the not-so-subtle moves. Aaliyah caught Victoria taking photos of her house from the sidewalk, twice. Another time, she noticed her peeking over the backyard fence. When confronted, Victoria always had the same condescending tone. "I'm just looking out for the neighborhood standards. We all have to maintain appearances." One Saturday, Aaliyah returned from running errands and found Victoria in her backyard, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, lounging beside the pool like she lived there. "What the hell are you doing in my yard?" Aaliyah asked, stunned. Victoria didn't even flinch. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. The previous owners were fine with me using the pool occasionally. I figured you wouldn't mind. You figured wrong. You're trespassing. Please leave." Victoria stood slowly, brushing invisible dust from her sundress. "You know, Aaliyah, this neighborhood has a reputation. I hope you can keep up with it." She walked out without another word, leaving behind her towel and sunglasses on the chair. Aaliyah installed security cameras the next morning. From that day on, the harassment escalated. HOA violation letters began appearing almost weekly, all anonymous. The grass was half an inch too tall, her porch lights were too bright, her recycling bins were visibly untidy. Aaliyah knew exactly who was behind it. Then, 3 weeks ago, she woke up to find her pool water cloudy and discolored. Her maintenance guy confirmed someone had poured detergent into the system, a prank that would cost her hundreds to fix. Aaliyah filed a police report, but with no direct evidence. Nothing came of it. Victoria, meanwhile, strutted through the neighborhood like a queen, always walking her Pomeranian past Aaliyah's house, always pausing just long enough to glance at her cameras or smirk at her porch. The final straw came last week. Aaliyah was hosting a small cookout with friends when she noticed Victoria on the phone standing in her driveway. Moments later, the police showed up, claiming they'd received a disturbance report. Loud music, aggressive behavior, suspicious activity, all lies. Aaliyah kept her composure, but inside something clicked. She was tired of being quiet, tired of being polite, tired of playing nice while being treated like a stranger in her own home. That night, she sat down at her desk, opened her laptop, and started planning. She wasn't going to just defend herself. She was going to make sure Victoria never pulled this kind of stunt again. Before we continue, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss one of our twist-filled stories. And tell us in the comments, what would you have done if you were in Aaliyah's shoes? For days, Aaliyah dug through every HOA policy, reviewed the city's property laws, and combed through hours of her own security footage. She wasn't just angry. She was focused. Every microaggression, every fake violation, every smug glance from across the street had led to this moment. She even found footage of Victoria throwing a small object into her backyard late at night, the same night her pool system had been tampered with. But footage alone wouldn't be enough. She needed a way to expose Victoria's behavior that couldn't be denied, twisted, or excused. That's when she remembered a conversation with her cousin, a chemist, about a pool dye used to detect leaks. The dye was completely non-toxic and invisible under normal conditions, but when it reacted with certain ingredients found in high-end sunscreens, lotions, or hair products, it left a temporary, highly visible tint on the skin. Not permanent, not harmful, but definitely noticeable and memorable. Aaliyah ordered the dye online from a commercial supplier, read every detail of its use, and tested it in a small bucket. Just one dab of a luxury sunscreen Victoria had left behind during her uninvited visit, and the water turned a glowing, unmistakable shade of blue-green. That weekend, word began to circulate through subtle social media posts and indirect whispers that Aaliyah would be out of town for business. It wasn't true, of course. She just made sure to be seen wheeling a suitcase into her car, locking her front door, and driving off before circling back and slipping quietly through her side entrance, where she had a clear view of the backyard and her security feed ready on her phone. And right on cue, Sunday afternoon around 2:15 p.m., Victoria strutted into Aaliyah's backyard, through the side gate like it belonged to her. This time she brought company, two of her equally entitled friends, all wearing coordinated pastel swimsuits, floppy hats, and enough designer sunscreen to coat an army. They didn't even hesitate. They laid out their towels, unpacked wine glasses and snacks, and eased into the pool, laughing like they were at a private resort. Aaliyah sat silently behind her blackout curtain, watching every moment unfold, every step, every dive, every smug smile, all of it being recorded in high definition from multiple camera angles. And then it began. At first it was subtle, a strange tint along Victoria's arms, a bluish streak down one woman's leg, then another with streaks on her chest and shoulders. "Is it the pool lighting?" one of them asked, concerned. Victoria raised her hands to her face and froze. Her palms were turning blue-green, unmistakably, hilariously, undeniably. "What the hell is this?" she snapped. Panic spread. The three of them scrambled out of the water, grabbing their towels, shrieking about stained skin and ruined appearances. One of the women pulled out her phone to check her reflection and screamed. And now, before we get to what Aaliyah did next, if you've been enjoying this story so far, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on the bell for more wild tales like this one. And seriously, what would you do if someone broke into your backyard and ended up glowing like a neon sign? Now, back to the chaos. Victoria spotted one of the security cameras blinking above the fence, her face twisted with rage. She stormed toward the gate, leaving wet footprints on the wooden deck, yelling about pressing charges and lawyers. But she was forgetting something important. She was the one trespassing again. What she didn't know was that Aaliyah had already cut together a video montage, a masterpiece of passive resistance. It included the backyard invasion, the diary action, her previous intrusions, the sabotage attempts, and even her fake 911 call, all set to smooth jazz. And by nightfall, the video was online. Within hours, the video had exploded. What started as a quiet upload to a private community forum made its way to Facebook, TikTok, and eventually Reddit. It was titled, "Entitled Neighbor Turns Blue After Pool Trespass, Instant Karma." The views climbed by the tens of thousands. People couldn't get enough. The comment sections lit up. Why do people think they can just walk into someone else's property? She handled that with pure class. She's my new hero. I need a friend like Aaliyah. Local influencers reposted the video. A neighborhood gossip page picked it up. Within 2 days, it hit local news. And by the third, Aaliyah's inbox was flooded with interview requests. Victoria, on the other hand, was panicking. Despite her threats, she couldn't take the video down. Aaliyah had included timestamps, footage showing Victoria entering through the locked gate, and screen grabs of the fake HOA violations. The internet had already taken over. Memes, reactions, even remixes of her screaming and slipping on the wet deck. But it wasn't just about internet shame anymore. The real damage came from inside the neighborhood. Several residents who had once kept their distance from Aaliyah, unsure, silent, maybe even complicit, started reaching out. One couple shared how Victoria had tried to report their nanny to immigration. Another said she had filed noise complaints against their autistic son playing in the yard. The silence had broken. The next HOA meeting was the most crowded the community had ever seen. Aaliyah showed up with a folder full of documents. Victoria came wearing large sunglasses and a scarf around her neck, her arms still faintly stained. The room buzzed with tension. Victoria tried to speak first. "I'd like to raise a formal complaint about, actually," Aaliyah cut in, calm and clear. "I have a few things to present before we get to community concerns." She placed a USB drive on the table and handed copies of printed timestamps to each board member. It was all there: dates, times, footage, screenshots of online harassment, copies of the police report, even a signed statement from her pool technician about the detergent sabotage. By the time Aaliyah finished her presentation, you could hear a pin drop. The HOA president, who had once quietly sided with Victoria, cleared his throat. "Ms. Monroe, we sincerely apologize for everything you've endured. We'll be reviewing Ms. Langford's conduct immediately." Victoria stood up trembling. "This is a setup." She doctored the footage. "You walked into her yard multiple times," a voice from the back called out. "You're lucky she didn't press charges." Victoria fled the room, humiliated. Before we wrap up, if you haven't already, this is the moment to drop a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit that bell so you don't miss the ending to this wild ride. And if you've ever had to deal with a neighbor like Victoria, tell us your story in the comments. We're all ears. Let's finish this. The very next week, a for sale sign appeared in front of Victoria's house. The blue-green tint eventually faded from her skin, but not from her reputation. Local realtors knew exactly who she was. The story became so notorious that prospective buyers often asked, "Is this the Pool Lady house?" Meanwhile, Aaliyah's backyard became something else entirely. A gathering space, weekend cookouts, movie nights by the pool, neighbors dropping by with dessert or folding chairs. The very people who once avoided her now waved from across the street, stopped to chat, and invited her over for dinner. Aaliyah never gloated. She never rubbed it in. But every now and then, when someone brought up the infamous video, she'd smile and say, "Sometimes you don't have to raise your voice to be heard." She didn't win through shouting. She won through patience, preparation, and the perfect shade of poetic justice. And that's how a black woman stood her ground, exposed the entitled neighbor, and turned a hostile street into a real community. One camera, one plan, and one unforgettable pool day at a time. The ripple effect from the video didn't fade. In fact, it only intensified. Over the next 2 weeks, Aaliyah's home turned into something unexpected, a symbol, not just for justice, but for standing firm when everything around you tries to push you out. Neighbors she'd barely exchanged words with before now waved when they passed. Others knocked on her door cautiously at first, bringing cookies, small plants, or even handwritten notes. She was no longer just that woman who moved in. She was Aaliyah Monroe, the woman who stood up, who didn't break, who exposed what others had tolerated in silence for far too long. Some came to apologize. Mrs. Underwood, the elderly woman 2 houses down, rang her doorbell one morning, holding a container of banana bread. "I knew what Victoria was doing," she said, eyes heavy with guilt. "But I didn't say anything. I didn't want trouble. I'm sorry." Aaliyah accepted the apology without hesitation, not because she had to, but because she understood something most people didn't. Silence doesn't always come from malice. Sometimes it's just fear, and sometimes it only takes one person to break that fear wide open. The next HOA meeting was unlike any other. Held in the neighborhood clubhouse, it was standing room only. Some people brought folding chairs, others leaned against the walls. The energy was tense but expectant. Aaliyah sat calmly near the front wearing a navy blazer, natural curls pulled into a bun, and a leather folder in her lap. She didn't need to speak first. Others did that for her. One by one, neighbors stood up, not to complain about property lines or lawn heights, but to speak about their experiences. Mr. Patel recalled the time Victoria told his daughter her cultural festival decorations were too garish. The Garcias said they stopped using their driveway basketball hoop because of Victoria's constant noise complaints. Even a teenage boy, nervous and stumbling through his words, admitted Victoria had followed him one night because she didn't recognize him, despite him living 2 houses away. It wasn't just about Aaliyah anymore. It never had been. When it was finally her turn to speak, she didn't raise her voice. She simply placed her folder on the table, opened it, and slid forward a printed report, one that included timestamps, complaint letters, and footage logs. The board nodded solemnly. They had already seen most of it, but now the entire neighborhood had too. Victoria didn't show up to the meeting. Instead, she sent a letter. The board read it aloud, a half-hearted apology filled with vague language, empty justifications, and a refusal to accept full responsibility. The crowd reacted with a silence that said more than words ever could. Later that week, the board posted an official decision. Victoria Langford was banned from participating in any HOA leadership roles, and a formal censure would remain on record for the duration of her residency. Her influence, once so dominant, had been officially stripped. And Aaliyah, she didn't celebrate loudly. She just returned home, took off her blazer, and spent the rest of the evening by her pool, alone, peaceful, exactly how it was always meant to be. But before we dive into the final twist of this story, take a second to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell so you don't miss more true stories like this one. And let us know in the comments, have you ever had to expose someone who thought they were untouchable? Now let's bring this story home. The final chapter is just getting started. It was nearly dusk when Aaliyah received an unexpected email. The subject line read, "Request for interview, Houston Herald." At first, she rolled her eyes. Another media request. She was still recovering from the onslaught of attention following the viral video. But something about this one felt different. It wasn't just a reporter chasing clout. It was a journalist who lived just a few blocks away. A black woman who wrote an editorial column about race, housing, and social dynamics in Texas suburbs. She wasn't interested in sensationalism. She wanted to highlight the why behind Aaliyah's actions, what it meant to claim space, to exist fully and unapologetically to protect peace in a place where many didn't think she belonged. They met for coffee, talked for hours, and a week later the feature dropped. The woman who turned her backyard into a movement. It was thoughtful, reflective, and powerful. Aaliyah's story wasn't framed as revenge, but as strategy, as grace under pressure. The article went even more viral than the video. Other women reached out from across the country, black women, immigrant women, single mothers, queer couples, people who had felt the sting of being watched, judged, questioned, or cornered in places they had every right to be. And then came the invitations. Aaliyah was asked to speak at a local university about community conflict resolution. She was invited to an HOA reform panel in Dallas. A real estate podcast wanted her on as a guest to talk about racial bias in housing. And her own skincare brand, it exploded. Orders tripled overnight. Retail stores reached out for partnership deals. Customers started sharing messages like, "I bought this to support the woman who stood her ground." But even with all that, Aaliyah stayed rooted. She kept her backyard clean, her pool crystal clear, and her weekend gatherings relaxed and welcoming. She never let the fame get to her because her victory had never been about going viral. It had been about peace, control over her own space, a message, "I am here. I earned this. I belong." As for Victoria Langford, she moved out 6 weeks later. The official reason listed on her real estate profile was personal relocation. But everyone knew the truth. The whispers around her open house visits, the way agents tried to downplay the situation. The story had become so well known that Texas State Real Estate Board started using it in ethics seminars under the heading Respecting Personal Boundaries and Cultural Bias in Community Living. Aaliyah saw the moving truck roll away from her window. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just exhaled, turned up her music, and returned to her garden. The neighborhood had changed. New families moved in, diverse, vibrant, curious. People who hosted cookouts, lent tools, brought over fresh baked bread. And Aaliyah's home remained the center of it all, not because of what she did to someone, but because of what she built for herself. 1 year later, the annual Willow Creek Block Party was hosted in her backyard. Kids splashed in the water, music played, neighbors shared food and memories, and taped to the side gate, someone had printed a meme of Victoria's face mid-scream, all in good fun, with the caption, "Always ask permission." Everyone laughed, even Aaliyah. She knew this story would be told again and again, shared as a warning, a lesson, and a victory. And she didn't mind because this pool, this home, this life, it was hers, earned, protected, respected. And if someone ever tried to take it from her again, well, she'd be ready. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud, it's permanent. Thank you for watching this story all the way through. If it moved you, inspired you, or even made you cheer a little inside, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell. We post stories just like this, raw, real, and satisfying, every single week. And tell us in the comments, what's your karma moment? We read everything. Until next time, stay sharp, stand firm, and keep your cameras rolling.